want to bring in Craig Fugate, who is a former FEMA Administrator and Chief Resilience Officer at One Concern, to talk a little bit about what's been happening in Florida and kind of learning from these experiences as we move along. Craig, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
We want to talk a little bit more about FEMA. Having been a FEMA administrator for 8 years yourself, can you give us some insights to set Americans' expectations going forward of what FEMA can and can't do after major disasters like Hurricane Ian?
Well, let's probably talk about people who have had losses, businesses and homeowners that have had losses, and what FEMA role is in helping them recover. And it's important to understand that Congress did not design FEMA to be the solution to every problem. And that's why the first thing people are going to be looking at or being asked to look at is your insurance and what you had insurance for, because what FEMA focuses on is the uninsured losses. And so, and this is for primary homeowners and renters. Businesses can get assistance from the Small Business Administration Disaster Loan Program. Secondary homeowners are not eligible for most of the federal assistance. Congress intended it for the primary homeowners or renters in the area. In FEMA's assistance, you have to register for it. You have to give some information that shows you live there and you're impacted. And the type of assistance that FEMA is going to provide, at least initially, are going to be things like temporary housing assistance, rental vouchers, hotels and motels for people to find somewhere to stay while they're making the assessments. They're going to be looking at if they had flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program. FEMA is encouraging people to go ahead and register. They're going to do partial payments because they know some areas they can't get into yet. But through all of this, I think it's important to understand that FEMA's primary role in the response was supporting the state and local officials. So you've seen search and rescue teams, you're seeing commodities going in. That's really led by state and local officials. This next step in the recovery is where FEMA's going to be focusing on those families and those heads of households in the areas of impact that either didn't have insurance or didn't have insurance for the type of damages like flood, and providing that initial assistance to help them start to recover.
And talking a bit more about kind of serving specifically for Florida, before acting as the FEMA administrator, you served as Florida's emergency management officer. So you've got some firsthand knowledge there from 2004 to 2005, some destructive hurricane seasons for us there. How has hurricane response changed since then? Do you see us moving forward, getting better as we learn more and more?
Well, again, a lot of the lessons in Florida, we go all the way back to Hurricane Andrew and looked at what we had to do differently. And the key thing is, and I think you saw this play out here with Hurricane Ian, is when you're talking about the response, we often talk about, the local officials, the state officials, and the federal officials. But in this type of response, you really need to collapse that down and work as one team. So even before the hurricane hit, FEMA had deployed their leadership teams that would be working in disaster to Tallahassee to join up with their state counterparts, the state emergency management, division of emergency management. So Kevin Guthrie, the state director there, Gracia Check, who's the regional administrator in Atlanta for this area, were working together, bringing their teams together and preparing for these impacts. I think the lesson we continue to reinforce time and time again is we need to have speed. We need to get into these areas quickly. We need to focus on search and rescue. We need to support restoration of infrastructure. And then FEMA starts taking more roles in as we determine what the unmet needs are, the uninsured losses, and helping people begin their recovery process. But I want to be clear, FEMA assistance for many families will not make them whole. If their home was destroyed in floodwaters and they didn't have flood insurance, FEMA is not going to help them. It doesn't have the ability to help them rebuild their home, but it can at least give them the assistance of finding some place to stay and maybe replacing some of the things that were lost, while other federal agencies such as HUD may be able to provide longer term assistance depending upon how Congress puts together any relief packages.